An ancient curse has been awakened, and now monsters from the darkest recesses prowl the land. The call for warriors and explorers is raised across the land. It is with their blades that the fell creatures shall be slain, and with their torches that the darkness shall be pushed back. But woe to the traveler, woe to the inheritor, for not all terrors can be banished with steel and fire. Darkest Dungeon is a tactical RPG. In it, you manage a group of adventurers who are traveling into the untold depths of an ancient, ruined estate in search of fortune and glory. Your goal is to collect money and treasure, train your warriors, restore the ailing township, and hopefully drive out the nameless horrors that have taken up residence in this once peaceful land. Now, the game's structure is very much that of a traditional tactical strategy game. In the beginning, you'll find yourself in town with a few ramshackle buildings where you can hire various mercenaries and cutthroats and purchase a few basic provisions. Once you've assembled a team of up to 4 adventurers, you can then send them on a mission to explore a nearby dungeon. Each of the dungeons has various objectives, such as killing a specific creature, collecting a series of items, or exploring a set percentage of the map. The dungeons themselves are randomly generated as a grid-based collection of rooms and corridors, each of which may be filled with obstacles, treasure, or monsters. Once you encounter an enemy, the game switches over to turn-based combat. On your turn, each of your characters will be able to attack or use one of 4 basic abilities determined by their class, and defeating all of your opponents will reward you with money and possibly items. Complete the entire dungeon, and your characters will gain experience points, at which time they can return to town to rest, while you can use accumulated gold and materials to purchase upgrades. Now, one of the things that makes Darkest Dungeon's ruthless game design stand out amongst its contemporaries is that supervising your team of adventurers is a little bit more complicated than normal. In most tactics games, you can simply select whichever characters you want and bring them into battle at any time, but in Darkest Dungeon, there are multiple factors that affect your choices. The first is that the game includes a stress system, where as your adventurers explore dungeons, they slowly become unnerved and eventually unhinged by the overwhelming horrors that they witness. If a character accumulates too much stress, they may even snap during the middle of a battle, refusing to fight or possibly even attacking their allies. Now, stress accumulates continually while your characters are traveling, and with one of the game's most signature mechanics, you can use torches to temporarily reduce the amount of stress your characters accumulate. However, torches are limited use items, and taking too long to complete a dungeon means that your characters will eventually be overwhelmed by the lingering darkness. At which point you'll have to take them back to town so that they can rest and recuperate, as bringing characters with high stress with you on an adventure makes it more likely that they will go crazy. Now, if managing your adventurers' mental states wasn't enough, there are also a host of secondary statuses that can affect them as well. Over the course of their career, your adventurers can become diseased. They can become unstable. If they spend too long in town, they can even pick up bad habits like cheating at cards or kleptomaniacy. There's a whole host of negative traits that can affect your character's behavior, and getting rid of them requires spending time and money in the hospital. And if tending to your character's psychological and physical status wasn't enough, the game also includes a permadeath system. Characters that fall in combat are gone for good, and they lose whatever gear, items, and training they may have accumulated. Now, all of this sounds fairly frustrating, and it is. However, this frustration can also be a source of excitement, as all of these systems match up very well with the game's tactical combat. As mentioned previously, before you enter a dungeon, you select a party of 4 adventurers. Each of these adventurers has 8 different skills as determined by their class, of which you pick 4. Now, before you pick your skills, you'll want to select your character's order in the party. And this is one of the things that makes Darkest Dungeon's 2D tactical combat work overall. That certain skills can only be used from a certain position within the group. Melee attacks typically need to be used from the front, and ranged attacks from the back, although there are several support abilities that specifically rely on moving characters around and changing the order. The important takeaway here, though, is the customization. Each class has a specific role in combat that can change depending upon their skill selection. And this, combined with the stress and permadeath systems, means that your choices are critical. The same tactics will not work in every situation, and failing to plan or prepare is the fastest path to a bunch of dead adventurers. Now, to lighten the mood a little bit, what are some of the positives of the game? Well, for starters, it has an excellent presentation. Environments and characters are all beautifully stylized. The music and sound effects are suitably atmospheric for the terrors that await you. And the interface is simple and clean, providing all of your useful information in a concise format. Also, as alluded to before, the game's tactical combat is very good. There's a nice selection of adventurers to choose from, each of them with different strengths and weaknesses based on their class. And there's a wide variety of monsters and malcontents with which to challenge you, each of them requiring different tactics in order to be efficiently dispatched. And though I may have doomsayed a little bit in the previous segment when talking about the game's mechanical design, I have to admit the deck is at least not entirely stacked against you. Each of the game's systems has some small threshold of forgiveness. For instance, characters reduced to 0 hit points don't immediately die and still have the chance to recover if healed quickly enough. Sometimes the stress of a dungeon may cause your characters to rally and fight even harder, and not every affliction is negative. Now, where there is light, there is also dark, for you see, while many aspects of the game, such as the combat or permadeath system, are frustrating but also fun, there are other elements that are just regular frustrating. For example, level design is not exactly inspired. As I said before, the dungeons are randomly generated. And not only that, they're also concealed by a fog of war, which has the effect of making a lot of monster battles and obstacles feel arbitrary. There's nothing more discouraging than having one of your characters step into a trap that you literally had no way of knowing was there. Now, your characters can scout the dungeons and reveal upcoming tiles, but whether or not they will even scout at all is also random, which again makes a lot of the dungeons feel arbitrary and uninteresting, since it's very hard to anticipate what's coming when you have no information.
Ambushed by foul invention.
But probably the more poignant aggravation that you'll find in Darkest Dungeon is the game's progression system. Now, like a lot of RPGs, your adventurers will need to fight their way through several dungeons in order to accumulate enough experience to level up. But where the trouble begins is, even though they increase in level, they don't actually get any stronger until they buy better weapons, armor, and skills. And the only way that they can buy these things is by upgrading the buildings that you have in town to offer better supplies. But the only way that you can do that is by acquiring building materials from the dungeons themselves. And the reason why all of this is so tedious is because character advancement vastly outpaces your town's advancement. And I understand to a certain extent why they did this, since if a character dies, you want to be able to train their replacement up fairly quickly, but at the same time, it also means you are spending hours of game time just running through repeated dungeons, not even attempting high-level story missions, because even though you have all these level 5 heroes, trying to fight those harder enemies without weapon and armor upgrades is a virtual death sentence. I mean, by the final dungeon, you will have probably spent 30 to 40% of your time just gathering building materials so that you could upgrade your town and get back to playing the regular game.
Mortality clarified in a single strike.
In the end, I would give Darkest Dungeon 3 out of 4 stars, and my possible recommendation? I mean, this is a game that combines brutal difficulty with precise tactical combat and a bit of questionable level design and pacing. If you're interested in an unforgiving tactics game, then yeah, go ahead and check it out. But if you're at all looking for a more casual or streamlined experience, this is probably not for you. Alrighty, well, thanks once again for watching, and be careful out there. Don't delve too deep. There are secrets no man can keep.